Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today I want to go back to 1860, the fall of 1860. A lot of news was going on in the United States. A presidential election was in full swing. The nation was divided. We are on the verge of the results of that election triggering states to secede in the South, and of course, the Civil War in April of 1861. Meanwhile, in France, a craze was engulfing the city, in fact, spreading across Europe rapidly. That craze is called Cardomania, and it's a real thing. It's based on these little images that I've talked to you about on previous episodes. These little baseball card size images. They are paper albumin prints on very thin card stock. They have the photographer's name printed on the back and images on the front. These little images are the social media, the Facebook of the 1860s. It all began in France in 1854 with the invention by a photographer named Disdairy of a camera that was capable of taking multiple prints that could then be cut into pieces and put on cardboard, as you saw here in the example. So this idea of cards, visiting cards with your photographs on them, at first was not super popular, but it gained traction over a few years. And then after French royalty posed and then British royalty, everyone had to have these images made. And photo albums were then founded so that people could put these images that they were collecting into these albums. And it became something of a parlor game in Paris and London, and then in the United States, where folks were collecting all these images. I would visit your house and leave my photograph. You would come to my house, leave your photograph. We'd put all these images in albums, and then it became kind of a game to comment on them, just like social media, just like Facebook. The height of the craze, this cardomania in France in the fall of 1860, was such a big deal that a correspondent for a newspaper in New Orleans, Louisiana, the New Orleans Delta, one of their correspondents in Paris sent a letter trying to capture all of the hoopla of this mania. And I found this great article that provides details from this correspondent in Paris. And so crazy was the mania that it was making people do things like engage in duels, and romance was ensuing. So I want to read you this passage from the article so you can get a sense of just how crazy this cardomania had become. So here we go. Quote, "The card portrait mania has fastened itself upon public favor and has already produced incidents enough to furnish plots for several romances and dramas. For example, it is recounted in the clubs that a jealous husband, looking over the collection of photographs of a friend, unexpectedly came across the portrait of his own wife. The first impulse was to demand the destruction of the picture. The friend refused. The husband then walked off in a fury and sent his card without a photograph. Sequel, a duel in which Othello received a sword thrust in the arm. This was not a tragedy, but there is no telling what a clever dramatist might make of it." That's one story. Driving men to duel over the photograph of a woman, of a wife. Here's the second one. A handsome and romantic young gentleman is paying a dutiful visit to his aunt. He is looking over the lady's collection of photographs. All at once, he utters a cry of surprise and admiration. "My dear aunt, who is the angelic original of this portrait?" The aunt smiles. "That is Mademoiselle Blank, who often calls to see me with her mother. She is pretty but poor. Romantic young gentleman pretends to drop the subject, but is assiduous in his visits to his dear aunt until he happens to meet the poor young lady, with whom he falls desperately in love. Poor young lady reciprocates. Romantic young gentleman declares his passion. Oh, joy, he is accepted. Aunt objects at first, but finally makes her will in favor of the poor young lady. The wedding takes place, and the happy couple starts for Switzerland and then Italy, being in an unsettled condition just now. So there you have a couple of stories about Cardomania sweeping the French public, resulting in a duel where a man is caught in the arm by a saber. The young man who falls in love with a photograph in the album of his elderly, perhaps meddling aunt. All of that comes to the United States right on the verge of the Civil War, and the rest is history. Until next time, we will see you on the trail. Take care.